We've all been there, wanting nothing more than to go to bed after a long day at school or work. But do you ever wake up knowing that you didn't get enough sleep, just wishing that you could have slept better? And then you get up and get on with your day, tired, groggy, lethargic, just wondering how am I going to make it the rest of the day? Only to come home and realize that not getting adequate and quality sleep is really starting to affect your quality of life. You realize that staying focused in school is harder and harder with less and less sleep. You might even start to feel anxious and depressed with so much to do during the day and not enough time to rest at night. And that's exactly what they wanted to find out. The purpose of this study was to evaluate the relationship between sleep deprivation, sleep quality, and daytime sleepiness, and quality of life, perception of academic environment, and the symptoms of depression and anxiety.
The experimental design for our study consisted of 1,350 randomized students from 22 different medical schools in Brazil. They were each given a survey questionnaire regarding 5 different domains, and those domains included daytime sleepiness, sleep deprivation, anxiety and depression symptoms, and their quality of life. And each of those domains were tested using different scales. And so for daytime sleepiness, we use the Epworth Sleepiness Scale to determine their likelihood of the student falling asleep during 8 different day-to-day situations. And in regards to sleep deprivation, we use the sleep deprivation index to compare the average amount of sleep that they would get during the weekends compared to the weekdays. The Beck Depression Inventory was used to look at symptoms and attitudes that we know are associated with depression. And for anxiety, we use the State Trait Anxiety Inventory to detect not only the presence of anxiety, but also the severity of anxiety that the student had. And lastly, the VerisQ test was used to evaluate their quality of life. And this test was created specifically for students going into the health profession. And this test looks at 4 different domains that impact the quality of life, including the student's physical health, their learning environments while they're in school, different psychological aspects, and their time management. And so each of these categories were assessed with their respective scale, and the students received a score for each domain. And along with this result, they received information about the meaning of their score. And as a general rule for the first 4 tests that I mentioned, the lower the score, the lower the severity. So for example, if they received a very low score on the Beck Depression Inventory, that means that their depression levels are not severe. And so the same goes for the anxiety test, the sleep deprivation index, and the Epworth Sleepiness Scale. And for the quality of life test, however, the lower score represented a poor quality of life. And after the study was completed, the students were offered guidance and the opportunity to contact our research group for more information or any help that they desired.
All right, the Epworth Daytime Sleepiness Scale is on a scale of 0 to 24, and 0 to 10 is the average daytime sleepiness. The 11 to 15 is excessive daytime sleepiness, and the 16 to 24 is a more severe sleepiness. And our results show us that on average, females experience more daytime sleepiness than males, particularly in the severe daytime sleepiness category, where we found that there were twice as many females than males.
Okay, so the next graphs that we have to look at is the sleep deprivation index. This relates to the ESS, but I'll get to that a little bit later on. So we'll look at graph A right here. The x-axis is the sleep hours on weekdays, and then the y-axis is just how many subjects from that study that were a part of that group. So you can see like a normal bell curve here. I want to know who's sleeping more than 13 hours on a weekday because I wish that that was me. Maybe that's too much sleep. Looking over at graph B here, same exact graph actually. So we got sleep hours on weekends. That's the only difference. And then again, participants, as you can see, there's a little bit more of a, like, people sleep more on the weekends than on the weekdays, which is pretty normal and exactly what you would expect. So the next graph C here, is the difference between slept hours on weekends and weekdays. That's just the difference between each participant, how much they slept on the weekends and weekdays. And you can see just a normal bell curve as well there. And then the last graph that we're looking at is here's graph D, and that's the Epworth Sleepiness Scale score broken down into the subject percentage and what they put on that ESS. And so it also follows that similar bell pattern. And you can see that the highest person got a 22, put a 22, the lowest person put a 0. And so most people are going to be in that 10 to 12 range there.
All right, this graph it shows the levels of depression versus the ESS that we've been talking about. And so for the first part in white on the graph, it shows the ESS of 0 to 10. And so as you can see, that is a lower value than, for example, the excessive daytime sleepiness, where that is increased. And so that showed us a correlation in the amount of sleep that someone gets at night and their chances of having depression. For example, if you get more sleep, if you're not as tired during the day, you're generally in a better state of mind and you're not going as susceptible to depression.
Okay, this graph here is anxiety with respect to the ESS. So we have two different types of anxiety that were tested, and Lauren kind of broke the test down for us a little bit earlier on. The state anxiety is going to be our physiological and psychological responses to an adverse situation. Say we have a physiology exam this weekend, that's kind of the anxiety that we're feeling. Hey, we do have a physiology test this weekend. Trait anxiety is going to be more of like a personality linked, like emotional linked type of anxiety. The graph here breaks it up into those two different categories. We got state anxiety here on the left and trait anxiety here on the right in the x-axis. And then in the y-axis, just the different scores from that test that Lauren broke down earlier for us. White, again, the ESS of less than 10, gray, dark gray in the middle there, 11 to 15. And then black is going to be that severe sleep deprivation scale that they put themselves on. And the correlation between these is similar to those of depression. And then also later on, we'll see that it also correlates to other things. But you can just see here that people that have better sleep feel less anxiety, and the people that feel like they have more anxiety and experience more anxiety are getting less sleep.
All right, so now this is a quality of life graph when it comes to the ESS. And then for example, down on the bottom is the time management, psychological, physical, and the learning environment. And in the whites, just like the other graphs, the white on all those different columns show the ESS of 0 to 10. The gray is 11 to 15, and the black is the 16 to 24, so the severe daytime sleepiness. And in every one of these columns, it's interesting that the more sleep you get, the less sleepy you are during the day, the better your time management is, the better your psychological quality of life is, your physical life and your learning environment. It's all better if you're able to get more sleep. And it's pretty much the same trend from in each one of these sections as well. You can see how it just goes down from white to gray to black, and as we've said in the other graphs, that's the correlation with the better sleep habits.
Our study shows a positive correlation between those who have a lack of sleep, as well as sleep deprivation, quality of sleep, which leads to decline in academic, mental, and social performance. We use tests such as the ESS and the SDI to come to this conclusion when we compared students' quality of life, their self-esteem, as well as how well they performed in school, and use all of these variables to come to this conclusion. Is this you? Do you find yourself feeling anxious? Do you find yourself with this low self-esteem, pulling yourself down? Well, this is why this is relevant to you. This study should be a wake-up call to students, not just in medical school, but to students worldwide, especially in college. This study also talked about how there's students who feel academically validated for having stayed up so late studying. It's almost as if the payoff is just as good. However, a lack of sleep is harmful to you, and you shouldn't sacrifice this just for the academic validation. In conclusion, students, don't ignore your needs. Sleep deprivation can lead to numerous health risks. It can inhibit your performance in every way, just as this study has showed, and will continue showing. If you find yourself sleeping during class, if you find yourself unable to focus during the day, maybe think back to the quality of sleep that you're getting and assessing your priorities.